time to gather around the game, kids, because your uncles here at TCB have another story to tell, and this time is a little more involved in talking about a really bad game that should have been cancelled. This time we're talking about Crash Bandicoot. Yeah, you know who he is. Used to have a line of good games, until he didn't. Crash was made by a little company called Naughty Dog, and I'm positive you know what that company is. They used to make really fun games. Until they didn't. But let's not lose focus. You see, way back in 1994, after developing several games and renaming their company from Jam Software to Naughty Dog, Jason Rubin and Andy Gavin created a shitty little fighting game called Way of the Warrior. That somehow impressed Mark Cherney of Universal Interactive Studios enough for him to sign Naughty Dog onto 3 additional games. Gavin and Rubin decided that their next game should be a 3D action platformer, and because they envisioned the player being forced to constantly view the main character from behind, jokingly codenamed the game Sonic's Ass. And that will go on to become the original Crash Bandicoot. And it will further become one of the most popular, influential, and successful series to other greats gaming. Until it wasn't. But for now, let's remember the good times. This is Team Crossbody. Today we'll be looking at the original Crash Bandicoot, and this is part 1 of a Nostalgia Charge retrospective. Now, as a nostalgia tard, I guess it's only fair to tell you that we're not really nostalgic for Crash 1. Our earliest interactions with the series was 1997 Sony's Interactive CD Sampler Volume 5, which were universally referred to as the demo disc, but no one in their right mind would call it by its real name. This disc has some future classics on it, such as Tomb Raider 2, Intelligent Qube, Parappa the Rapper, Armored Core, and of course, Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back, specifically a demo of the level Snow Go. And this is how we were introduced to the potentially mentally challenged mutant Marsupial, with our parents renting the game not soon after. And by the time we actually got around to Crash 1, this series was well out of the hands of Naughty Dog for some time. I'm only mentioning this because we might be a little more critical in this game than most. Not saying that we absolutely will be because, spoilers, the game is good, but I thought we should clear that up first. I'll spare you from the usual, this is a 3D platformer, song and dance, and get right to talking about the game itself. Don't look shocked, you know what this is about. And let's not go on pretending this is your first Crash Bandicoot video, you little sluts. So what's Crash 1 about? Well, the story starts with the main antagonist, Dr. Neo Cortex, and his assistant Embryo trying to create an animal army called the Cortex Commandos in an attempt to take over the world. After creating other soldiers using Embryo's Evolve Array, they find and forcefully evolve a Bandicoot they name Crash, wanting him to be the general of his army. But when they attempted to brainwash him with the use of the Cortex Vortex, like the others, the device malfunctions and rejects Crash, with him escaping and the resulting chaos. After Crash makes his escape, Cortex prepares another Bandicoot for the Vortex as a replacement, his girlfriend Twana. He washes up on the beach of his home island and makes his way back to the castle to rescue her, with Cortex sending his best henchmen out in order to prevent this from happening. The story to Crash Bandicoot is simple and mostly out of the way. In fact, in order to view this opening cutscene, players will have to wait at the title screen for a little while. I always wonder why that was the case. I mean, sure, the scene is a little rough, and the voice acting is pretty bad, but what were they comparing themselves to? Resident Evil?
Enrico!
Don't come any closer, Chris.
Wait, what happened?
Double crosser!
Don't!
Hell. Umbrella.
Who is it? Is someone there? Double crosser? What did he mean by that?
I doubt it. Were they embarrassed about the presentation? Or did they really want players to jump right into the game? If that's the case, then they could have just made it skippable with the start button. Anyway, I guess we should be jumping into the gameplay too. Crash Bandicoot's levels consist of him traveling across 3 different islands, which the game's 26 levels are divided among. So Crash washes up on the shores of Sanity Island and gets right to work making his way back to Cortex's castle. As the first level, Sanity Island is simple by design, being used as a tool to get the player used to things like controls, and for the most part every kind of basic level gimmick is introduced here. It is not like Crash Bandicoot is a complicated game or anything, as it mostly involves running and jumping, but those things get relatively tough pretty quickly. This level teaches players about the different kinds of boxes Crash will be interacting with, throwing harmless enemies to practice spinning, providing a safe place to jump with this little climbing section here, and by the time players reach this point, should be ready to use the invincibility from collecting the 3 Witch Doctor mats. At this point of the level, easy to jump over pits begin to show up. See? Easy. Jungle Roller starts right off where Sanity Island did, giving Crash more easy enemies and pits to jump past until the level's titular Jungle Rollers, which will teach players that they will need to sometimes wait before getting through some obstacles, while introducing more aggressive enemies in the form of these man-eating plants, with them continuing to teach this level's lesson of patience, but this time with enemies. In order to defeat these plants, Crash will need to stop to bait out an attack, then spin or jump them before they can attack again, although their chomp can be ignored by just spinning into them. If you manage to hang on to your mask and have level 2 before entering this level, you can straight up blow past about a third of it just by chaining together invincibility periods, which kinda undermines the concept, but I guess this method is for more experienced players to take advantage of. There's a moment about halfway through the stage that you might notice a little green spot before hitting the checkpoint in this area that will go away once you get closer. That will activate once you collect one of the game's main collectibles with gems, particularly the colored gems. In order to obtain these gems, players must complete a certain stage by breaking all the boxes without losing a life. Then return to the location where you found this gem could be used and, well, use it. The collection method for these colored gems will change to be more varied starting with Crash 2. I'm mentioning this now because we didn't 100% Crash 1. It's not difficult, just tedious and annoying, and we just didn't bother. Anyway, the Great Gate is where the game begins to challenge you a little bit while being all about verticality, with the use of these steel boxes to go higher up the gate. This stage will teach players that enemies can also be used to reach higher areas or to obtain something, through the use of not only these turtles that will retreat into their shells once you bounce on them, but also natives that will try to push Crash off the platform he's on. We're jumping on them, making them block his attack in order to be bounced on, or leaving them open for a spinning attack. There's also monkeys, enjoy them. On the obstacle front, there are these poles that will begin to fall once you approach it. They'll begin to shake to give away that it's about to happen. Slippery moss covered platforms to try to stay on, and these torches that will have to be timed around in order to get past safely. Oh, during this stage we managed to snag 3 Tawna tokens, which Crash will stop everything he's doing, jump in the air with his mouth agape. Clearly he's vividly remembering a time where Tawna must have had her mouth agape. I don't know the narrative behind these bonus rounds, so we just dubbed them the blowjob stages. It's nice that Crash has something to keep him motivated during his adventure. During these BJ stages, Crash will have a chance to earn more Wampa and extra lives. But more importantly, these are one of the only areas which players can actually save their game, which might be the most infamous part of Crash Bandicoot 1. These have been talked about to hell and back, so there's really no need to go into them. It's stupid, it's annoying, it's unnecessary, and that's all you really need to know. What we didn't know, or just simply forgot about, was the fact that different character tokens are actually different kinds of BJ stages. Tawna stages will feature a jungle setting and will give the player the ability to save or generate a passcode if they don't have a memory card. Embryo stages will feature 6 life crates, but they don't save your progress, and takes place in caverns, while Cortex stage features a dungeon and will have Crash earn a key upon finishing to be used to unlock later levels. Grabbing the key also triggers a key save, which will save the key but not your progress up to this point. And why doesn't it? I don't fucking know, it just adds even more questions to the already questionable save system. Now you might be thinking, TCB, if you call these bonus rounds BJ stages, then what does it mean when Crash collects the Brio and Cortex tokens? Well, that's when we'll tell you our Crash Bandicoot bonus round meta-narrative gets a lot darker for no real reason, kids. Now that the game assumes you got the handle of the general rules all locked up, it's time to introduce some newer gimmicks. In this level, amply named Boulders, just fucking boulders, Crash will be tasked with outrunning a couple of giant rocks throughout the stage. I don't know about you guys, but I think it's safe to assume it's because of those fucking tribesmen you've been bashing up back at the Great Gate, which seems like a bit of overkill just to deal with a 3-foot tall mutant Bandicoot. But I get what Crash 1 is getting at here, clear as day. The noble savage does not exist, so maybe these guys need a little something stronger than your casual missionary dropping by, if there are just gonna be a bunch of green-skirted, shell-pushing, boulder-rolling jerks. Let me stop here. Before I get jammed up for offending somebody about me making fun of a bunch of cartoon depictions of tribespeople, this level starts what will be one of Crash Bandicoot's most defining set pieces. And while just having a player run towards the camera may not look too impressive compared to what games are capable of today, this was a big deal and helped the PlayStation look that much more badass and cutting edge when stacked against its competition. The level of self outside of the gimmick is fairly straightforward. The game is really starting to let go of the training wheels, giving out some fairly simple series of jumps that's made a little more challenging due to the boulders essentially being the timer. There is a point at the end of the level where Crash will have to navigate past these posts or whatever they are, and that can be a little tricky because Crash seems a little slower when moving diagonally, but it's nothing too bad here. Upstream focuses a little more on tighter platforming with more narrow pathways, lily pads that can't be stood on for too long, traveling leaves that have to be waited for, and two kinds of piranha plants that have to be jumped on. I suppose if this level is to teach the player anything, it's timing, and before anyone says it, there's a difference between patience and timing. Well, I think there is anyway. Only thing I learned here is that Crash has this annoying habit of moving by himself after spinning in the air that got me killed like 3 times at the start of the level. Don't know if it was our controller acting up or the game. I'm just gonna go ahead and blame the game because Crash 1 shouldn't be challenging to our complex adult brains and reflexes. So we finally make it to the first boss fight of the game.
Hailing from Dunkin' Donuts, from the great state of obesity,
This fat son of a bitch named Papu Papu, with Crash entering his hut and interrupting his nap seems to be the reason for the fight. Papu doesn't do much here. He'll attempt to crush you with his staff and then he'll spin around until he's dizzy, where that's your cue to strike and hop on Pop. Poo. You can speed up the process by jumping on him when he's spinning around if you know when to do it after his post-hit invincibility frames. We clearly didn't remember, but whatever, we had some Witch Doctor mads, so that still got the job done. After 3 hits, Papu is down for the count, and he doesn't get back up because Rolling Stones is where I believe the game stops going easy on the player by reintroducing most of the past jungle-themed obstacles and enemies. This is where I think the overall difficulty of the game is set, and I feel it doesn't get much harder after this point. Before the first island is finished, you're put through one more level gimmick before moving on. Hog Wild is the first of what will be another one of Crash Bandicoot's signature set pieces, and that's these auto runner stages. In these, Crash will usually be riding on something and typically against his will, and players will have to avoid various obstacles that will cause Crash to, well, crash if hit. I always thought it was strange that this wasn't placed before the first boss. Surely it could have been traded with just an earlier level like Upstream. I suppose this gimmick doesn't really appear that much in Crash 1, so I guess it could be viewed as a quick challenge to cap off the island. Capping off things here in the first island is Native Fortress, which is the final level of it. With nothing else to really teach the player mechanically, this level is another ascending focus affair, which can be considered a harder version of the Great Gate. It's a pretty long level on top of that, so if players aren't confident in their abilities beyond this point, there's little Crash 1 can actually prepare you for. Before we leave this stage, however, it always annoyed me that Papu wasn't placed after Native Fortress instead of seemingly being randomly placed after Upstream. This level serves as Crash's escape from Papu's territory, and he just leads right on to the second island. Wouldn't it make more sense to place the boss here? Right? Did you know? Developer Andy Gavin said that Naughty Dog wanted Crash to animate similarly to the old Looney Tunes cartoons. with squash and stretch physics. Did you know crates were added very late into the game's development to fill out the more boring and straightforward parts of the levels? Did you know a series of hand-drawn full motion animations were made by the Korean animation studio ACOM? These guys were responsible for some of the more error-prone episodes of the Transformers, and produced by Universal Cartoon Studio. At first, these were thought to be part of a canceled cartoon based around the series, but it was eventually revealed to be scrapped cutscenes for the game that were not used because Sony thought it wouldn't mesh well, and would rather push the 3D graphics of the PlayStation instead. Did you know? At the time of Crash Bandicoot's release, Sony CEO Ken Kutaragi apparently hated the character. With the making of this video being the longest we've ever spent with the original Crash Bandicoot, we actually grew to like the graphics here. I really like this version of Crash, and while he does look a ton better going forward, obviously the model being used for the first game really left an impression on us. I enjoy the faces he makes, and you can't really pinpoint what kind of emotion he's trying to express. His running cycle that looks like he's taking a light jog, but also looks like he wants a type of downers and he doesn't want to be there. And that fucking strange leaping scream he does before entering the blowjob stage is really charming. I can't believe I used to think this version of Crash was expressionless, and I thought most of Crash's Looney Tune-like animation started from the second game. Damn, how did I miss this in this game all this time? Well, at least I'm playing it now. The other characters, while still looking okay, don't look as good as Crash himself in my opinion. They often look very polygonal compared to him. This especially can be seen with the bosses. Once again, they don't look terrible by any stretch of the imagination. It's just something I noticed. I believe the biggest claim to fame for the first game is their environmental design. You heard this all before. Crash starts off washed up on the beaches of Sanity Island, makes his way through the jungle, crosses rivers, tribal strongholds, ancient temples to reach his destination of Cortex Castle, which the environment will leave the more natural setting and enter more of the dangerous man-made areas that show Cortex's negative impact on the environment around him. I never noticed in Sunset Vista, players can see the shadow of Cortex's castle on the horizon bathed by the actual sunset itself. Before that, I never really understood why a level was given the name Sunset Vista. Then it dawns on me. Vistas are usually referring to some type of pleasant view, which of course seeing Cortex's castle tries to send the opposite message. Most levels of this game usually connect narratively to the last. For example, on the first island while Crash is on his little adventure, most of the antagonistic forces he will usually encounter at this point will be natural ones. Well, I don't know about the rollers, but whatever. Once he reaches the Great Gate, he unknowingly, well, as far as I know, enters tribesman territory, and from that the next couple of levels involve Crash dealing with these natives and their attempts to take him out, either from them actively attacking him or shredding up straps like in Boulders. This kind of storytelling happens throughout the game. Personally, I don't have any issues with this, but my brother Boosh keeps saying the placement of Popple Popple should have been at the end of Sanity Island instead of seemingly being randomly placed at the end of Upstream. I don't know if this is a unique take or not. I just really appreciate the execution. Anyway, with that, Crash moves on to the second island, aka Wampa Island, which features waterfalls, ancient ruins, temples, and forgotten bridges. Island 2 begins with Up the Creek, which is the second river type stage in the game. Not much to say about this one, it's just more in the same you will find with these type of stages. After making his way up the creek,
Boo this man!
Crash meets his second boss, the insane kangaroo Ripperoo at the top of the waterfall on the second island. He's so insane that Cortex and Brio had to restrain him with a straitjacket after he was created. He's the first of the Doctor's forces that Crash encounters. As you can see, this boss fight centered around a 3x3 grid in which Roo will hop between in a fixed pattern. A unique crate to this fight is the Big TNT, which will float in the water for Crash to jump on. Players will have to watch Ripperoo patterns and time the Big TNT to explode when it lands. After 3 hits, Ripperoo will be defeated, and Crash will continue on his mission to rescue Twana. It's not a bad boss fight or a hard one, it's just a little annoying that you have to wait for the big TNT to reach the required spot for you to set them up the route to fall into. There is a flow to this fight, that if you break it, you will have to wait a little bit. In the Lost City, Crash is making way through the area that's covered in jungle ruins. This will have him navigating around moving walls that will push him into a nearby water or pit, bats, and jumping iguanas. Near the end of the stage, there's a particularly nasty wall pushing pattern that costs us about 4 lives. All this leads to the temple ruins. Crash finds his way inside a temple, and the game does get a bit more difficult. I know my brother said that the overall difficulty doesn't improve much after Rolling Stones, and that's still more or less true, but I did notice the game tries to get a bit more trickier from here. Plus he sucks at platformers anyway. In this dark temple, he will find snakes, spiders, bats, spike traps, crushing walls, and way more unstable platforms than the usual up to this point. Also, midway through the level, this happened. Yeah, we're that good. Warning players right off the bat with a big old danger sign. Road to Nowhere finds Crash attempting to cross several old collapsing bridges with planks that either has fallen off, or on the verge of falling off, or have frozen due to the high altitude. The whole level is shrouded in heavy fog, making it harder to see what's ahead. And for some reason, the area is littered with just wild hogs and turtles just everywhere. And those hogs somehow have the ability to run on air. I love the atmosphere on this stage. And as the expert of Crash Bandicoot, I, and other high-level players, know that the difficulty of this stage can be undermined by simply jumping on a rope and walking the... Okay, let's try that again. Okay, let's just play the stage normally. With a name like Boulder Dash, you can tell that this is another Shade stage. Very similar to Boulders, but with more obstacles in a way to make it harder to escape. Pleasant naming aside, Sunset Vista is very similar to Boulder Dash. It's just a harder version of a previous stage. In this case, it would be the Lost City. Unfortunately, this will be the last level with this kind of design. Once again, there's not much to say, pretty much the same level, just with more obstacles. Waiting for Crash in the crystal-filled cavern at the end of the Wampa Islands is the third boss that will attempt to block Crash's progression, the Giga Shad, Koala Kong. In this fight, Crash and Kong are at different sides of the cavern, separated by a river of lava and a railroad track. Kong will toss rocks that Crash must avoid and will eventually toss a particular heavy rock once per phase. After throwing it, Kong will begin to feel the pump and start flexing his muscles, which will give Crash the opportunity to spin a thrown rock back and deal damage, making sure to avoid the minecarts on the way. After 4 hits, Kong will be knocked out, and Crash will be ever closer to return to Cortex's castle. Why Kong couldn't square up and shoot Crash out is beyond me. Did you know? This will be the last time players will see Tawna Bandicoot for some time, as she would be removed from the series and replaced with Coco Bandicoot from Crash 2 onwards. The story of her removal was said to come from complaints from the marketing director of Universal Interactive Studio, who thought her Jessica Rabbit-like proportions was too outrageous. Naughty Dog attempted to redesign her, but thought the end result was too different from their original vision, and just removed her from the sequels. Did you know? Wampa fruits are apparently a hybrid between an apple and a mango. Did you know? Crash was originally a wombat by the name of Willie. Did you know Tawna Bandicoot was inspired by Pamela Anderson? I don't see a resemblance. Do you? Did you know? The reason Crash is a giant shoulder with arms and legs was because he was purposely designed to have no neck. This was done to make it less complicated to animate. Another thing that I didn't appreciate until actually playing the game was the music. I never thought it was bad, especially considering the remaining games during the Naughty Dog era, but I always kinda just wrote it off. Well, for this video I actually listened to the entire soundtrack for the first time and loved it. I mean, my heart will always belong to Crash 2 and Warped, but I was actually really shocked when I ended up enjoying a good amount of it. The first Crash game's music is a lot less bombastic than the later games and takes a lot more of a naturalistic atmospheric tone, and while I do think a good amount of music is still kind of boring, I absolutely adore tracks like Heavy Machinery, Hog Wild, Toxic Waste, and most of the boss fight theme. Although the overall soundtrack is still a little too slow for my taste, I could definitely see how the music of the sequels took what worked here and added a lot more, let's say, energy to the music now. Damn, you ain't ever too old to start appreciating something. The first level of Cortex Island is Heavy Machinery, which Crash starts on a heavily industrialized side of, which is a nice change of pace from all the naturalistic settings the game featured so far. This level will have Crash smashing robots and probes, jumping over boiling pipes, and trying to maintain balance on conveyor belts. Crash continues to make his way through the front of the island and finds himself entering Cortex's personal power plant. Known as Cortex Power and Gas Company, or simply Cortex Power, this facility provides power and energy for the various machines that he uses in his castle, which causes excessive amounts of toxic waste that is then dumped into the ocean. Once upon a time, I thought nothing of the stage and shrugged it off as a basic factory level with a cool name. But now that I actually have to take a real look at Crash Bandicoot, I can confidently say that this is my favorite stage in the game. Not for the level design, as I feel that doesn't do anything special, but for my newly discovered respect for the visual storytelling of the game, which was always going on, but it feels more deliberate here than most. Not only does a player get to see firsthand just how much waste is generated for the name of Cortex's experiments, but much like Papu Papu, Crash has to contend with another antagonistic force that's not directly Cortex, as unlike most bosses that's part of Cortex's commandos, this one isn't just casually stable after the end of a certain amount of stages. It makes his presence known throughout the use of these thugs that shows up throughout the next couple of stages. Next step is Generator Room, which I'm assuming is still within the Cortex power building. Outside of the monitors that displays Cortex, who's clearly off a bean, I don't have much to say about this one. Feels very much like those temple levels from earlier, just with a different theming. Well, there is this cool bit where players can get a quick look at who's the upcoming boss by the use of these warnings on the, what do you call these, blast doors? Anyway, that's pretty cool foreshadowing. I'm assuming that's what it is anyway, fuck it. As the name indicates, this place is obviously filled with toxic waste. This level also marks the return of Pinstripe's goons, who will be throwing different kinds of barrels at Crash, with some of them throwing bouncing or rolling ones at you. Matter of fact, these big monsters are the only enemy type featured in the stage. Other than that, this is a very simple level, with you moving forward while constantly dodging barrels. Crash arrives in the office of the CEO of Cortex Power, the trigger-happy mobster Pinstripe Polteroo. What exactly is a Polteroo? Your guess is as good as mine because all I know is that they're usually called kangaroo rats. Apparently his full name is Pinstripelli Potterati, which is extra random because how does he have an Italian version of his animal name? At any rate, this boss is visually awesome as he fires untold amounts of Tommy gun ammo at Crash while flipping and running around his office, while Crash has to hide behind cover until his weapon jams on him. That's about it. From a gameplay perspective, this fight is uneventful. If you're confident enough, Pinstripe can be attacked back to back after his iframes are up, which makes the fight faster, which is neat because you're just waiting for the most part. The character is much more interesting than the fight itself. You see, Pinstripe isn't just another henchman like Ripper or Kong, and seems to be placed pretty highly within Cortex's chain of command, with him being at least third in command, of course, after Cortex and Bria. To me, it feels like Pinstripe wears a lot of hats around it. Cortex left him in charge of a very important part of his stronghold with Cortex power, or at the very least he's responsible for maintaining the core generator. And I'm sure he's acting as Cortex's bodyguard as well. He's seemingly treated better and held in higher regard than the other mutants the scientist has made, even to the point where he has made Pinstripe his own little army of goons. And stopping him must have really put a wrench in Cortex's operations on the Sanity Island, with him shooting the generator after being defeated. The build-up to Pinstripe was so much better than Papu Papu. Moving along, Crash takes the high road, and this is the last of these style of bridge levels, and is a harder version of Road to Nowhere. It's another instance of this style of level theming not really fitting the area Crash is currently in. I get it. Crash is crossing the bridge connecting to the power plant to the castle itself, but I feel it really should have just changed the look of the level to be more thematically appropriate. On to a slippery climb, and the atmosphere of this level is awesome. Crash must climb the exterior of Cortex's castle in order to find a way in during the storm. This level features tons of tricky jumps from quickly moving platforms to ones that retract into slippery inclines, and vultures that must be jumped on in order to reach the other side. Crash will also encounter Cortex's lab assistants that will throw beakers at him and these prisoners that try to swipe at him. Lights Out features another gimmick future Crash games will revisit, and that's the platform through pitch black areas while breaking Aku crates to create a light source. That's about the most I can say about this level. It's a straight line, it's kinda dull. This level will be expanded on later, so it's okay for this one to be so simple. Halfway through, it'll throw some hanging scythes at you, but that's about it. Here's another pro Crash player tip. If you don't feel like waiting on the platforms, you can just easily jump on the sides. This will cut the amount of waiting time down. Shit. Just play the level normally. Also, this happened. So yeah, eat my ass, Crash 1. Jaws of Darkness is the last of these ancient temple stages, not to be confused with those ancient temple stages. I don't know how Crash got here. Wasn't he just inside Cortex's castle proper? I checked the wiki for this one and it says that we're under the castle now, but we just climbed up to get to the previous level. So, Jaws of Darkness is filler. Castle Machinery is the final factory level, and okay, how the fuck did we get here? Okay, so after the power plant, we crossed the bridge to get to the castle, level theming aside. Then climbed the outside to get into the castle, which I assume was pitch black because Pinstripe accidentally destroyed the generator in his fight with Crash. So far, so good. So for all intents and purposes, we still should be going up. How do we end up under the castle in a random temple, and then back to one of the factory sites if we're supposed to be in a goddamn castle? So Castle Machinery is filler. Embryo, the N standing for Nitrous, is the penultimate boss of the game. Cortex's right-hand man and the inventor of the Evolver Array that turned all these nice animals into disgusting furries, so he's clearly in the wrong. Set in Brio's laboratory, the fight will involve him mixing liquids and throwing them at Crash. If he throws the green solution, it'll create a ball of slime that will attack Crash, with defeating it doing damage to Brio, for some reason. Him throwing the pink beaker will cause an explosion, and as the fight goes on, he'll throw multiple of the same colored beakers. And getting too close will have Brio smash the beakers together to have Crash respect his zoning game. When he's down to 3 hit points, he'll drink the liquid and will transform into some kind of incredible hulking monster guy. He'll start spurging out, causing the lab to cave in, which will have slabs fall down that Crash can use as a platform to jump on his head. After enough hits, he'll go down and Crash will make his way to the final showdown with Cortex. The lab is the final level of the game. Kinda. Sorta. Technically. The lab is the only level in the game that utilizes the exclamation point crates. which will open nearby doors and create platforms temporarily that Crash must make his way to while avoiding electrified lab assistants and TNT crates that will be hidden in piles of normal boxes, having you second guess spinning those things. This is also the only level in the game not to have witch doctor crates, so unless you came in with one of those, you better be careful. Skipping right over the Great Hall will have Crash finally confront Neo Cortex, and the background of his burning castle. Crash hitches a ride on top of his escape blimp, with Cortex on his hoverboard flying over to try to finish the job his goons and commandos couldn't. During the battle, Cortex will fire 3 types of lasers at Crash: a homing pink shot, a blue one that travels across the screen at various angles, and a green shot that can be deflected back at him. Throughout, more green shots will have to be deflected in order to deal damage to Cortex, up to 2 shots at a time. Why? Hell if I know. But they will just sit there like good little balls of energy while Cortex just floats around ignoring them. After enough hits, Cortex's hoverboard will be destroyed and barring you not running off the blimp like a smart-ass madhouse, the final cutscene will take place. Instead of going inside where it's safe, Tawna will appear on top of the blimp and give Crash a hug. While he celebrates and prepares to enter a certain stage he'll no longer need tokens for. And with that being said, Crash Bandicoot comes to a close. There's an alternative ending once you get all the gems, which will give you access to the Great Hall where Tawna will be waiting on an escape bird, and they'll just leave, and after a quick "where are they now" segment, the credits will roll. Not worth it. Did you know that Crash Bandicoot, Jumpin' Flash, and Mario 64 were among the first platformers in full 3D? Did you know the character that would eventually be known as Aku Aku was just known as Witch Doctor in the original game? Did you know that the classic boulder segments were created out of a concern that people won't be able to connect with Crash character without seeing his face? Did you know, in the Japanese version of Crash Bandicoot, breaking an Aku Aku crate will have him give the player advice on how to play the game? Did you know that Crash ended up voiceless because the creators wanted Crash to feel goofy and fun-loving, and felt that giving him a voice would make him end up feel lame?
Crash Bandicoot. And I have no idea how I got here. Last thing I remember, I was on the Wampa Islands and about to free my friend Tawna from the clutches of the evil Dr. Neo Cortex.
Good move on their part. Supermaster 332 writes, "It is terrible. Everything is almost a scam. The difficulty is hateful and terrible since it is difficult and not playable. The gameplay is boring and generic. Only jumps and attack that does not help much. The only good thing about this mediocre game would be the graphics that are good for their era and the music, with average level design." Wow, an actual negative review of Crash Bandicoot. So we were planning to make fun of a good review for the sake of a bit, but we decided to do a bit more research, and we luckily came across a 1 out of 10 star review for the game. This is peak review of the past right here. So Crash Bandicoot is a scam. Almost a scam, sorry. This game generally has one of the better difficulty curves of any other game in this era. The only stage I would consider a difficulty spike was Stormy Ascent, and that level was cut because Naughty Dog thought it was too hard and long, and it was replaced with Slippery Climb, which in itself is a rather challenging stage on its own. Hell, that might be the most challenging level in the game overall. The stages that you do play in Crash 1, Slippery Climb aside, stays at a consistent difficulty pretty early on, and they don't evolve much from there outside the occasional tricky section. Now 100% in the game can be considered challenging, but we find it more annoying than anything else. Ignoring how extreme the wording is, the checkpoint and save system might be interpreted as hateful or terrible, but nothing in this game is unplayable. Calm down. Who goes into making a review of Crash Bandicoot in 2021 and calls the gameplay boring and generic? I mean, to play devil's advocate, the gameplay is simple and it doesn't do anything by any means that rock the boat to any extent. But that's kind of the whole point of Crash, is to be like a callback to Mario and Sonic simpler days just in 3D. But this review was made in 2021. Who in the hell does not know that Crash 1 is simple? It even works in your favor. If you don't enjoy the boring and generic nature of the game, then maybe try the third one that might be more up your alley. Well, at least they like the graphics and the music, and I can kind of agree with the level design being fairly average, comparatively speaking. As we said somewhere in the video, we weren't very nostalgic with the original Crash Bandicoot. But after spending a fair amount of time with the game for the making of this video, there's a newly formed appreciation for the title. We used to think this game didn't hold up compared to the other two entries in the series, but I'm glad to say that we're completely wrong here. It absolutely does. The graphics for the time are excellent. The level design, while admittedly not very challenging, is still fun to play through, and I know we didn't 100% the thing, but I'll openly say that this is the only Crash game that we don't like to finish all the way because it's not particularly fun. The game doesn't really try to reinvent the wheel here or anything, but that's not actually needed to be an overall fun game. Do we think it's better than games like Mario 64, which was as a competitor at the time? No, not really, but once again, that's not actually needed. Crash Bandicoot did exactly what it was designed to do, and that was put eyes on the PlayStation. And although this isn't the game that got us into the series, it clearly would have at the time. So I'm glad we took a deeper look into it. So that's the original Crash Bandicoot, the game we weren't very nostalgic about. But the next two games, they fit firmly in the Nostalgia-Tar's wheelhouse as we grew up with these and spent the most time with them, Crash 2 and 3. So it should be pretty fun looking at those games through a more closer eye than usual. We'll see you next time on Nostalgia-Tards. Will Crash 2 and Warp stand the test of time? Will you subscribe to the Team Crossbody channel? And will Team Crossbody be able to cover the final game of the Naughty Dog era before the end of summer? Find out all the answers to these exciting questions right now. Yes, oh god yes, and they'll cover Crash Team Racing. After the success of their original Crash Bandicoot, development of a sequel started right away, a month later to be exact. Crash 2 development reportedly went a lot smoother thanks to the new engine made for the game. It only took them 13 months to make. It had a modest budget of $2 million, which in today's day and age will give a AAA dev team the amazing ability to create one whole level. Eventually closed down shortly after the game's release because the game cost way too much money to make, and they couldn't make it up with game sales. Silly industry issues aside, in October of 1997, Crash Bandicoot 2 was released to critical acclaim, and is often regarded as the best game in the entire franchise. Maybe? What's the deal? What's the public opinion on Crash 4 is about time anyway? I mean, just playing the game, I'm sure everyone hates the 100% that thing. But this isn't about that nightmare. It's about this nightmare. Part 2 of our Crash Bandicoot retrospective. So the general plot of the game isn't all that complex. While running a quick errand for his out-of-nowhere sister named Coco, Crash is suddenly abducted by Cortex and is quickly convinced to collect 25 powerful crystals from around the world for him in a bid to save the world. Throughout the adventure, Cortex's holograms will be interrupted by both Coco and Embryo, with the former attempting to warn Crash of Cortex's true intentions, and the latter threatening Crash that he will stand in his way and throw his forces at him as long as he sides with Cortex and collects the crystals, but also tries to have him gather gems instead in order to have him have a strong enough power source to destroy Cortex's space station. At the end of the story, Cortex's ultimate plan to harness the power of the crystals, along with the energy built from the impending planetary alignment to power his massive Cortex vortex in order to enslave everyone on Earth, is revealed and put a stop to, with the non-canonical ending having the station still floating over the planet, and the 100% true ending involving Crash collecting the clear and colored gems to use to power Brio's laser, destroying the Cortex vortex once and for all. The plot of the game seems really simple on paper, but there's a lot to be desired on the execution of its story elements and beats, because it's just really messy for absolutely no reason, and we may argue that this is the only true massive blemish on the otherwise fantastic game. And I get the game was made in a year, but is that really an excuse when the plot could have just gotten a once over to see all the strange issues? The story's not really well paced, not like it needed to be any more complex than it already is. But bad story aside, let's get to actually talking about the game itself. Well, one more thing. Because the levels of Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back lack the same type of progression-based design the previous entry had, as well as not having the same environmental storytelling techniques, we're going to be presenting each of the game's 32 levels a little differently this time around, and we'll explain what we're doing real quick, just to avoid any confusion. So, Crash 2 replaces the world map with the series' defining hub, the Warp World, which allows Naughty Dog to place any level anywhere, removing the limitations of having to theme a particular stage and having to worry about where Crash will be in relation to something like an overworld map. The long and short of our idea is because there's no storytelling between these stages, along with the difficulty of the game not evolving more or less between beginning and end, and the level themes being repeated more than once, we decided to lump each theme together, as we believe it'll be more interesting to talk about this way. For a quick example, Turtle Woods will be Jungle Level Act 1, and the Pits will be the second act because they usually have similar gimmicks and whatnot. I guess think of them as acts from the classic Sonic series. Now with that being said, let's get into the game now. Crash has somewhat of a quick intro stage, so before everything gets started, let's take a moment to get a handle on the improved movement, which have been altered ever so slightly to make the game feel much more responsive. With the biggest improvement coming from Crash actually stopping immediately when the directional button is unpressed. This change makes us feel a lot better, as it justifies all those random deaths in Crash Bandicoot when we would just death march off a cliff after we stop pressing the directional button. It's not 100% perfect, as we feel Crash is a little too twitchy when it comes to controls, but overall, it's a plus for the game. But the improvements doesn't stop there, because Crash has several new additions to his move pool, which include a crouch, crawl, slide, high jump, long jump, and a body slam. These help the level designs feel a bit more involved, so you're not just running and jumping for most of the levels. Not that you won't be doing that, you'll be doing it in tons, but it generally helps add some more variety to the gameplay. Because Turtle Woods is more or less a stage everyone will pick first, we'll begin talking about the jungle levels. These areas look very similar to the early levels of the first Crash Bandicoot. These stages are rather simple, sporting mud pools to be waded through, and pits to fall in where Crash has to defeat several rat, possum type things in order to proceed. Or you could just jump right out. Turtle Woods is where players will also be able to attain the blue gem, which shows off the game's much improved gem system. You see, the OG gem system was annoying, because not only did it require all the boxes to be broken, but players couldn't die while doing so, which caused a lot of moments of frustration when you simply wanted to get it done. This was so silly that we didn't even bother 100% in the game. Not like it's worth it anyway. Crash 2 fixes this by allowing players to attain any gem even if they end up losing a life. That's not to say there isn't any deathless gems to get, but they've been repurposed and placed in the death routes. These routes are usually placed near the beginning or in the middle of stages, and there are a lot harder versions of the stages you're currently in. And if you die while in that route, it remains unlocked. Unfortunately, if you die before hitting the route, you'll be locked out of it. I actually thought this was a bit of an overcorrection, because the death routes usually don't feature boxes, so players don't have to worry about the bounce counter, meaning you can just pick up the route's gem and death abuse back to the main path, and collect everything in one go in most cases. I don't think this is supposed to be the intended way, because most of these routes return you to the warp room after you complete them. I don't think it's particularly bad, it's just strange that it can be done this way. But speaking of improved, the token systems of first games were replaced with bonus stages, which are short challenge areas where players are able to attain additional Wampa lives and boxes that count towards the overall stage's box count. Bonus stages can be completed as many times as you like, and if you die, they also act as checkpoints until completion. Some levels, like the pits, will have alternate paths that require players to backtrack, which is an issue of the series that is never really fixed. The problem with backtracking, in normal levels anyway, is that the camera doesn't compensate and you'll end up falling in holes or running into enemies. It's just overall cumbersome. The final two jungle levels, Night Flight and Totally Fly, are nighttime variants that expand on the lights out stages from the original game, in which you have to collect some source of light, this time being fireflies, in order to see the path ahead. And speaking of Night Fight, it has this strange occurrence where you need to backtrack into the death route near the end of the stage in order to pick up two boxes to attain the box gem. I believe this makes this the only death route you can get to without using a platform. And it's the only death route with boxes in it. It's just weird. The Sora family of levels will have Crash navigating through a series of twisting tunnels that's filled with mutated rats, rolling barrels, ill-infested pools, fans that block your path with some needing to be destroyed with enemies, and flame-throwing lab assistants. These levels put a heavy focus on branching paths more so than most other levels, with the ill deal having the most well-known hidden path that leads to a green gem. Crash also has the ability to swing from monkey bars, which gets used a good amount here. The river levels are like the stream levels of Crash 1, with the main gimmick being the first vehicle, the jetboard. During Hang 8, players will also enter their first colored gem path, in which they would take you to a kind of death route for additional boxes, but will return you to the main path after you finish up. Air Crash is the first stage to have a secret exit that will take you to a secret warp floor that will either unlock pathways such as the red gem path in Snow Go, or new levels altogether. Hang 8 and Plant Food both have this countdown gimmick that will task players with making it to the end before time is up. It will earn you a gem, with Plant Food awarding you the yellow gem. Did you know? There was a manga series loosely based around Crash 2 called Dansu! Jumpin' Nadaboken! Or Dance, Then Jump, It's a Great Adventure. It has some oddities such as Crash Bandicoot talking, slight swearing, and Wappa fruit and crystals being renamed to apples and power stones. This series only lasted 2 issues, with the third being cancelled for unknown reasons. Did you know? This is the first game to feature dynamic difficulty, in which an Aku Aku would be given to the player if they repeatedly die in the same section, or a box will be replaced with a checkpoint. Did you know? In the Japanese version, Aku Aku provides players with hints on how to play, like he did in the first game, but this time he will animate and speak to the players directly.
Yeah, Crash. わしはアクアクじゃ。一回だけならお主を守ってやろうかの。
Making this the first time he was given a voice. But nightmare animation aside, did you know if the player returns to the warp room without a crystal, Cortex will contact Crash to explain to him about his expectations?
No, Crash. I said bring me the crystals! Now, get back in there.
Repeatedly doing this will have him become more and more frustrated with it.
Look above the doorways. Above each, there is a big crystal-shaped slot. Fill all 5 crystal slots in this warp room by retrieving 1 crystal from each of the 5 areas. Only after we have filled all of the slots in this room can we continue on our quest. This is the last time I will remind you.
Did you know? The characters over the Cortex that have scenes with Crash are Embryo and Coco. They both have themes made for them. Brio's theme is a remix of his bonus and our boss theme from the original, while Coco's theme is a new Shrek created just for the character. Did you know that within the Ripperoo boss arena, there's a Crash Bandicoot hint guide that can be found among the books in his library? Needless to say, the graphics of Crash Bandicoot 2 was a massive achievement for Naughty Dog. And now since we have the context of the original Crash fresh in our memories, it just helps make the case for the beauty of this game so much more. Of course, that's not saying Crash 1 wasn't a fantastic looking game in its own right, but the sequel just takes everything that worked in that game and just expanded on just about everything. In the first game, while Crash was still expressive, a lot of his animations still left a lot to be desired, and that's fine. It was the first game after all. Crash 2 adds so much life to the Bandicoot's actions. The I don't want to be here running cycle of the first game was replaced with this energetic stride that helped depict Crash wanting to actually be somewhere for once. And this is for all of his returning animations. Well, almost. I never understood this animation. What the fuck is he doing? Okay, he's still doing it. Why is he tweaking like this? On top of the much improved returning animations, the new engine Andy Gavin created for the game allows for so much more. Over 9,000 frames of additional animation to be exact. This allows Crash to have all kinds of reactions to what's happening around him. This can especially be seen in the various death animations, in which he has double the amount of from the previous entry. I also appreciate that the camera is pushed further back as well. We forgot to mention this with Crash 1, but we didn't like how close and pushed up the camera was, which made it hard to see things that was in front of you at times. Our biggest issue with the first game's graphics was that the enemies and bosses looked very rough and polygonal compared to Crash himself, so I'm glad to see all the other characters look pretty much on par to him now. What impressed me a lot about the graphics, oddly enough, were the facial expressions. These actually caught my attention during our playthrough. Since most of Crash 2's story segments involve a giant head talking at you, Naughty Dog smartly used the squash and stretch nature of the character models to help push and sell some emotions out of them. Cortex looks a little strange at times, and that's probably because of a scowling expression, so you'll see his eyes and teeth constantly shrink, and it looks a little gross, but it's fine overall. I think Coco pulled off some very convincing looks during her scenes because of her much larger eyes and more naturally placed eyelids and brows. The levels look fantastic. They're packed with a lot more detail this time around, but at the same time still very clean looking, if you get what I mean. Nothing about the graphical design of these levels look overly busy, and that is a very hard balance to achieve. If I had any complaints about the graphics, it would mainly lie with the repeated use of level themings. In my humble opinion, the levels should be structured similarly to how we're talking about them. Maybe the first warp room can focus on the swords or ruin stages, and you work your way up to the space station levels to cap off the game. It doesn't need to be tied to the story or anything, but having a little visual progression, I believe, helps the game so much more than just feeling like you're playing levels for the sake of playing them. The snow levels host the most famous level of the game with Snow Go, and the most infamous one with Cold Hard Crash. These levels regularly have ice physics, falling icicles, two forms of crushing obstacles, with one that had to be timed and another that will slam if stood under for too long, slighting sills, and the return of the OG rollers. Speaking of returning things from the original game, these level themes are the only ones that have the return of the auto-running sections with Bear It, Bear Down, and Totally Bear. But instead of a gross wild boar, Crash will commandeer a polar bear cub named Polar. I'm guessing with his consent since they're friends after all of this. These are improved on by giving him a speed up button which allow for dashing jumps as well. Obstacles are also improved on thanks to the better controls with slippery ice sections and pits that have killer whales quickly jumping in and out of freezing waters. Now, Snow Go is the most popular stage in our opinion due to it being featured in Sony's demo disc, and I believe it shows off a lot of what makes Crash 2 really good, with it making great use of Crash's extended moveset, a nice balanced difficulty, visuals being different than anything shown in Crash 1, and having one of the best snow level tracks in gaming. Along with the second stage of this type, Snowbiz, and the portal levels, these sections are among some of the best levels the game has to offer, with a great mix of challenge for Crash 2, while remaining fun. There is one trip up however, and that's with the final snow themed level, Cold Hard Crash. Now, we know most people familiar with the series might dub this one of the most difficult stages in the franchise, before Crash 4 at least, but we actually don't think it's that bad. Crash 2, when all said and done, is a pretty easy game. Maybe a little too easy with them trying to correct the sins of the first game, so Cold Hard Crash giving players a little pushback is welcome. But this stage does suffer from a bit of assholeness, with having to backtrack through the death route after triggering an exclamation point box, and without an Aku, it can be pretty painful. There's a box off screen in the bonus section that cannot be seen, and if you don't know what's there, it's hard to figure out. Also in that room, there's a bunch of TNTs that need to be exploded before you move on. They need to be on screen, otherwise they won't count towards the box total. That's not a level exclusive issue or anything, but it is the most annoying here. And finally, if you plan on 100% in this stage in one trip, prepare for it to be way more complex than it needs to be. You have to play until the end of the death route, trigger the switch, backtrack to the start of the route, hit the checkpoint, kill yourself, hit back to the death route, reach the end, get the gem, skip over the checkpoint, kill yourself again, go back to the midsection of the stage, and then you're allowed to play it out normally, but that's only if you want to get everything in one go. This is a troll level, there's no doubt about it. The level design here is carefully engineered to annoy weaker players, but again, we still don't think it's that bad to play through, only to 100%. If you think Cold Hard Crash is some kind of inconsistent trolling good tips from the devs, then these level types might be the most naturally difficult levels Crash 2 has to offer, that have some of the more demanding platforming sections in the game, from slippery rotating platforms, flame-throwing stone faces, collapsing floors, and monkeys. Enjoy them. Did you know? When Crash come in contact with fire and burn to a crisp, his model quickly reverts back to his Crash 1 version during his death animation. Did you know that the Japanese and English versions of the game calculates game progression differently? For the English version, the game calculates 2% for each crystal, 1% for each gem, 1% for each secret warp room found, and 3% for beating Cortex. In the Japanese version, it calculates 1% for each crystal, 1% for each clear gem, 2% for each colored gem, 1% for each secret warp room found, 4% for beating the box except Cortex, 6% for beating Cortex, and 1% for getting 10 lives from Poor. Did you know? According to Jason Rubin, in the Japanese version of the game, the animation in which Crash is crushed only leaving his head and his feet was replaced because the animation reminds Sony of a serial killer who was loose in Japan who decapitated his victims and only left their hair in their shoes. That's fucked. Did you know that Tiny and the Komodo brothers were originally going to be in Crash 1? Tiny was originally called the Tasmanian Tiger, and the Komodo brothers were originally samurais called the Dragon Brothers, with Joe originally being called Komodo and Mo originally being called Komodo. Did you know that you can find this hidden spot during the bonus game in Crash Crush? Did you know that Team Crossbody really appreciates you watching this video? Thank you. The music of Crash 2 is so much fun, and it's one of the rare examples of a game OST matching the energy of what's going on screen almost perfectly. The music does a fantastic job of remaining somewhat atmospheric like the first one, while interjecting so much personality and life that just fit the series so much better. Finally leaning into more of that zany Looney Tunes like attitude Crash was going for. The general opinion I've heard being shared among many was that Crash 2 had consistently the best music in the series, and that fact might very well be true, with amazing tracks such as, well, Snow Go, many of the Death Route themes go insanely hard, but Unbearable is our favorite track. And probably the greatest piece of music in the series, the Jetpack theme. While not personally our choice for best music in the series, there's no denying that Crash 2 stand up there with some of the best music in video games, period. The alpine levels are snow-covered mountainous areas that remind me of Looney Tunes for some reason. They regularly feature dash pads, exploding seas, spitting plants, mines to jump over, bees, lumberjacks, electric fence, and Crash's ability to dig under certain surfaces that never show up to like the mutant games. These are my favorite levels in the game. The Alpine theme also has a return in Chase gimmick levels. These are much more dynamic than the previous games by having a lot more interesting obstacles blocking your path, utilizing both front-facing and back camera angles, and in the case of Unbearable, combine the two gimmicks together by adding in a short polar segment before its end. Set in Cortex's space station, these are the last set of levels in the game. Pisting it away and Spaced Out will have Crash dodging the likes of crushing pistons and shrink rays. These levels are really tame for a set of final platforming levels, and the lack of any real identifiable level gimmick other than raw platforming. Night Fight is actually in this warp room as well, but it's clearly filler. Spaced Out is the technical final level of the game and stands out because it includes this game's multicolored gem path, with each path having a different focus. The blue gem is platforming, the green gem focuses on shrink rays, the yellow gem is heavy on the hot disc, the red gem is a combination of shrink rays and shield wielding enemies, and the purple gem is a straight shot to the clear gem. This is clearly a better version of the Great Hall from the original Crash. The space station themed levels also have the jetpack gimmick, which judging by the marketing are supposed to be the standout levels of the game. So we have no idea why Naughty Dog waited until the final warp room and stuffed them there when one of the stages could have been placed in the engine area. Surely that would have been better, but I digress. People often say that these stages are hard, but I actually think they mean that the controls are awkward to get used to. And I do get it. These stages are just kinda dropped on the player at the 11th hour. Getting past the controls, the levels are quite fun once they're gotten used to, and are a neat final gimmick to finish off the game. I'll be frank, man, the bosses of Crash 2 are not good in our opinion, and the main issue stems from them not being hard enough. Hell, hard enough doesn't describe it enough. They're just piss baby easy, even when we were kids. Bosses should be used as a test of skill. There is not an excuse why bosses shouldn't be challenging in any game. But in Crash 2, it feels more like a power fantasy, like Crash is the Doomslayer or something. So, as the fighting game players that we are, we decided to rank each of these guys in a tier list from best to worst, as if you have to guess what the worst is. And on top of that, we'll be giving these guys some quick patch notes to see if we can make them more interesting.
Whoa!
Cortex's new assistant has the best fight in the game, only because it isn't the case of an enemy passively aggressively attacking you. And Jin's attacks are sorta aimed at you this time, and as the fight goes on, his pattern changes up, so for once it isn't boring at the very least. Crash has to use his really seen telekinetic whomper throwing abilities to dent up Jin's mech's weak spots in order to win. Other than having some more aggressive lock going in this fight, it's fine. No real changes needed.
Whoa!
Tiny Tiger, who I thought was an evil Crash when I was younger, is one of the better boss fights in the game, in which Crash will have to try to avoid Tiny stomps while trying to have him jump into a pit which will cause him damage. It's simple, and I think the disappearing platforms are RNG based, but that's about it. Just two guys jumping around like assholes for 2 minutes. I suppose it's a harder version of the Ripperoo fight, but that doesn't mean much. Also, is Tiny the Guts Man of the Crash series? So the Tiny boss fight conceptually is pretty good, but he can move a little faster. This dude literally looks like he's playing hopscotch. And as the second and third phase come around, maybe he causes a little shockwave that ripples across the arena as he lands, as well as the platforms falling faster during this time. This boss fight is largely fine, it just needs to be harder.
Whoa!
The Komodo brothers have great designs, fantastic music, atmosphere, and entering the boss room for the first time might have you saying something like, hell yeah, this is going to be fun, but in actuality it's just another boring fight. The cycles are so boring and easy. For the first round he takes his brother and spins him around, but much like Ripperoo, he doesn't even aim at you or anything. It's like he's trying to threaten you with the implication of a confrontation. Then Kamo and Mo starts throwing swords, but once again, not at you. The final cycle has Mo spin Joe once again, while he throws swords at the same time, but he barely attempts to hit you. This dude really is a Komodo Mo. So with fixing the Komodo brothers, Komodo Joe could have actually been aiming at Crash. It's not like he's moving that fast. If he were to be sped up, then the attack will have some kind of soft lock on. Also, the last phase of this fight should be moved to the first, where he's throwing swords and spinning his brother at the same time. Secondly, when Mo was throwing the consecutive series of swords towards Crash, once again, it wouldn't hurt if he actually aiming at the guy. And third, personally, I'll just add a whole new final phase, and that will be a combination of the spinning Joe with soft lock on and Mo throwing multiple swords. We feel this will make the fight more engaging.
Whoa!
We're kinda on the fence about if this rematch is better than the original. We're leaning on the side that it's an overall worse one because at least in the first game you're interacting with things. With this one you're literally just waiting around for Roo to damage himself, which I guess works for his character, but is not really interesting in the gameplay sense. At the very least it's a different fight while keeping the spirit of the original, but I mean come on, it's worse. He's not even like chasing after you or anything, so this boss only works for people who are playing it for the first time. So if we're going to fix this fight, and this might be a little annoying, but have his patterns be more RNG, or have his final spot be random instead. He's a kangaroo, just have him jump high and then have the player guess where he's going to be and avoid him. It keeps them on their toes at the very least. Have every phase go faster. And finally, for his final phase, he uses a mix of both TNTs and nitros.
Whoa!
The final boss has Hello We Have Doomsday Zone at Home vibes, as Crash has to stop Cortex from reaching his station. This has to be one of the worst boss fights in history, only right up there with like general skills from Star Fox Adventure. The only real obstacle in this fight is your patience, and I suppose your ability to use the jetpack. It's really like Naughty Dog wanted to do Doomsday Zone, but didn't know how to express it with a non-side scrolling camera. That, or they just ran out of time. It's just dog water. Okay, so how can we quickly fix this guy? First things first, I'll give my guy an extra hit point. He's the final boss. Then maybe have this fight be more like Crash 1 but mobile. You got the mines and the asteroids, so maybe have him fire the same kind of lasers from the first game. If players want to hang back and play more safely, they can wait for the green laser to spin back at him, but the more bold players will dodge everything and hit him directly once they get close enough. Also, the timer will still be there, maybe shorter, so it'll add a risk-reward element. You know, perspective is a hell of a thing, isn't it? We played through Crash 2 so many times casually, but only now when we have to play it with the context of making this video, do we notice how unpolished the game actually is. Every good point made in the game's favor can be immediately countered with a negative. Let's do a rundown. Improved presentation and great voice acting. Yeah, but the story is very mediocre with one of the worst plot twists of all time. It has amazing graphics. Well, the game has a lot of samey looking areas, so are they really taking advantage of that? Tons of replay value. Some of the secrets and gems are too hard to figure out without prior knowledge, or some kind of guide. And there are things such as the bad boss fights and the finicky jetpack sections. Don't get us wrong, Crash 2 is a phenomenal game, and most of the negatives brought up can be considered nitpicks at best when we're looking at the larger picture of what the game actually is and does. But negatives they are. This is kind of hard to explain. Crash 2 plays perfectly when playing the game from start to finish, but everything else around the game just feels so rough. Crash 2 is ultimately held back by its most impressive feat, and that's the fact that the game was made in a little over a year from the original. The game is just not as good as it could have been, and once this feeling entered our minds, it was a hard one to shake. How would this game be if it got a little extra attention to its writing, difficulty, level design, level theming, and mechanics, all these small areas that needed a little more refinement? Can Crash Bandicoot 2 really be called the best game in the series when it clearly needed more time in the oven? You might think so, but we don't. We just can't bring ourselves to do it. We wanted to say it was the best, we really did, but after this playthrough, no, not anymore. I hope we did a good job explaining our take here. If we didn't, don't worry. Our reasoning will become crystal clear. But first we have to cover the third and final classic style Crash game of the Naughty Dog era, Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped. See you next time on Nostalgia Tards.
Good, don't bend too hard on the legs.
Yeah, that's close enough.
Okay, who knows what a two-point landing is?
Ooh, sorry. Okay, is this bad? I got a tangle.
All right.
You jump! What are you? I got an idea. What? You jump.
Yes, you can do this. Now jump!
He's training for his biggest adventure yet. Oh yeah, he's ready.
Come on, trust me.
Yeah.
Jump!
I say you
got
jump.
the insurance for him. Thanks, Rod.
Yeah, thanks, Rod.
PlayStation.
So after the release of Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back, and at least a 3-month gap, Crash Bandicoot 3 started development in January of 1998, leaving Naughty Dog with about 10.5 months to make and ship the game, with a slightly increased budget of $2.3 million. This was even less time than they had with Crash 2, but after a very pressing outing with that game, I don't believe anyone at the time was actually worried about it. The big talking point for this entry was the fact that the game ran on 4 different engines. One of course being the engine used for Crash 2. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. With this, they also added several new abilities, animations, and put a larger focus on replayability to build on top of the already close to perfect gameplay there. But this was only 2/3 of the game. The remaining portion consisted of 2 3-dimensional engines used for water and flying levels, with a specific focus on free roaming, and the final being a driving level made to behave somewhat like a simulator. Naughty Dog showed out wanting to squeeze some ideas they thought weren't possible for not only Crash Bandicoot, but the PlayStation as a whole. Sure, Crash 2 was a highly praised game, and to be honest, they could have gave people more of the same and no one would have said boo. But it would have definitely had its detractors, sure. Though I'm positive no one would have called it trash by any means whatsoever. But they didn't go that route, instead going for the more ambitious path. And it absolutely paid off, as Crash Bandicoot 3 released on November 3rd of 1998 to unanimous praise, and for the sake of getting our opinions of the game out of the way right now, nailed these ambitious ideas without too much fuss or hangups, and for such a small team is something to be applauded. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. This is part 3 of our Crash Bandicoot retrospective. Immediately after the 100% ending of Crash 2, where Embryo uses the power of the 42 collected gems in order to operate his giant laser, aimed to destroy the Cortex vortex in the act of revenge. From here, Embryo just sorta disappears, like we never hear from him again canonically. Well, I guess until Crash 4. The resultant debris from the vortex is pulled into the Earth's orbit. It plummets and crashes to a nearby ancient ruin, and that frees a spirit that instantly makes his presence known. The newly named Aku Aku immediately identifies his presence as a sealed away brother, Uka Uka. Meanwhile, Cortex, who really should have died at the end of Crash 2, after seemingly being tossed uncontrollably to the depths of space without any protection.
My mission has failed. My ship is lost. It's heating unit. It's minus 455 degrees.
Matter of fact, he should have died after Crash 1, but I digress. He's seen now cowering before Uka Uka, who berates him about his previous failures. This doesn't make a ton of sense because his first 2 plans were entirely self-serving. It didn't come across as a command for some overarching evil being. But we don't know what Cortex would have done if any of those plans would have succeeded. So maybe freeing Uka Uka was a part of all that. Anyway, Cortex began to blame Crash for all his troubles, but Uka Uka is having none of it. Because of his failures, there are no more power sources on the planet, with the crystals and gems being used by Crash, Coco, and Embryo during the ending events of Crash 2. But he did decide to show him mercy, since it was his failure that inadvertently freed him. So Cortex is given one last chance. And then he is introduced to Entropy, the creator of the Time Twister, which is the name of the time machine used to justify the levels of Crash 3. You know, for a pretty ancient evil and being sealed away, how the hell does Uka Uka have all these connections to all these science guys? I suppose super science in out of itself could be considered magical in nature, so I guess it isn't too far off. Back with the Bandicoots, Aku Aku tells them the history of his brother and informs them that it must be stopped at all costs. They all rush out the house and travel to the same time twister the bad guys were just at. Okay. I get Uka Uka knowing this thing since he has connections and whatnot, but how does Aku Aku know? This is a place of science. How would he know? After battling Cortex's minions and collecting the gems and crystals throughout time, Crash and Aku Aku battle Cortex and Uka Uka at the core of the time twister. The villains are beaten and the time twister implodes. Cortex, Tropy, and Uka Uka are caught in a massive warp portal while Crash and company manage to escape. The portal tosses the 3 out into the prehistoric past, turning Cortex and Tropy into babies to fight over Uka Uka. Meanwhile, Crash, Coco, and Aku Aku returns home, never to be bothered again. The story to Crash 3 Warp is a massive improvement over Crash 2, which is just riddled with inconsistencies and convoluted logic. The plot here is simple, it doesn't try to do anything fancy with some twists or turns. The bad guys are bad guys, the good guys are good guys, and that just does a better job at justifying what happens during the game. Plus, luckily for us, the game isn't named similar to the nature of the last one, so we avoided any Crash Bandicoot 3 Cortex turns into babies or something. platforming in Crash 3 Warp is very similar to its predecessor, and to be fair, they didn't have much to add. The controls seem a lot tighter, and Crash seemed to have a lot more of a looser feeling while he bouncing around and jumping, and a bunch of little other micro improvements and adjustments can be found here and there, such as changing the spring and wampa crates from 10 bounces to 5, which I never understood why that bullshit was allowed to fly in Crash 1, let alone the second game. But it's fixed now, and it speeds up the box collection by a considerable amount. Another great improvement was removing boxes from the returning death routes, which will get in the way of attaining box gems in Crash 2. It also minimizes on the backtracking, with the alternate entrance to Future Frenzy being the worst, having to travel all the way back to the beginning of the stage in order to collect a few boxes. I mean, we like death routes, and I wish there was more of them in the game, but as it stands, there are only about 3 of them in total, and it's not like you need a gem to get to them either. We would have been okay if Naughty Dog kept the boxes in these paths, if it meant we get more of them. There's not a whole lot of fresh gimmicks that can be found with this gameplay mode. The medieval stages, while looking nice, are bland from a design standpoint. It could have really needed a death route or some type of gem path to spice things up. The prehistoric levels are pretty cool, featuring the Triceratops chase section and the addition of the almost Mario-like Yoshi segments where Crash can ride on the baby T-Rex in order to move faster and jump higher. Although it's super restrictive, as they put you in these tiny little sections where we feel that it could have been good for at least an entire level. It's really underutilized. There is Agapus Rex, but it's primarily a 2D affair. The Saudi Arabia themed stages look pretty nice visually. Having Crash jump from rooftop to rooftop and hanging from gratings above the city. The ancient Egyptian levels are the strongest looking areas in the game aesthetically, and feature some of the better level gimmicks Warp has to offer, including the returning light source gimmick from previous games. The final levels of the platform section are the futuristic Metropolis levels, which might be the most challenging levels for Warp because they have a lot of moments where players will have to sit and wait for things like platforms or enemies to become vulnerable. Timing is the key in these stages. I guess we really never noticed how kind of bland Crash 3 stages actually are from a level design perspective. Don't get us wrong, we feel like the stages are Warp and more fun to play, but that might be because of those little improvements we mentioned earlier that help keep the pace up in the game. Hell, Crash 3 platforming might be even easier than the second game, and that's saying something because those levels are pretty damn easy.
You know what really doesn't help with the overall easy nature of the platforming of Crash 3? Getting power-ups that break the game further. After defeating each of the game's much improved bosses, Crash will be rewarded 1 out of 5 superpowers. These abilities vary wildly in usefulness. The supercharged body slam is just as useful as the normal one, except this time Crash gets to break lock crates. And that's it. Really, this move does have a satisfying animation and sound, but it's too situational to be called a good power-up. The double jump fares a lot better, actually augmenting a part of Crash that actually changes his gameplay and can be applied to levels, even having some enemies that need to be double jumped in order to be defeated. The Death Tornado spin allows Crash to spin faster and longer. It might be the coolest power-up in the game, given that if you use it in the air, he can glide for a short time. The Fruit Bazooka can be either really situational or totally broken depending on how it's viewed. On one hand, it trivializes every combat encounter and even some platforming challenges that involves things like TNTs, enemies, or nitros, but then again, Crash has to come to a complete stop while using it, so players might not want to waste their time pulling it out and aiming. The final superpower come in the form of speed shoes, which are generally useful all around, but can also come in handy when tackling the game's relic challenges. More on that later. Since this is the first game in the series to feature power-ups, I guess we can't complain about it all too much, especially since they aren't terribly expanded on later in the series. But our major issue is abilities like the Death Tornado spin, double jump, and Fruit Bazooka really doesn't feel like the levels weren't designed with them in mind, both for the already completed and the upcoming levels after receiving the power. I get that these are supposed to make you feel stronger or whatnot, and sometimes the level design will make use of 1 or 2 of these abilities, but most of the time the levels will still be made in a certain way that doesn't involve them at all. And it feels like playing Crash 2 stages with mods on or something. The argument can be made that not having the levels designed around these abilities allows for far more expressive and experimental approaching when tackling platforming, and that's a fair way to look at it. Wait, hold up. Actually, now that we're looking at it, what's the point of the supercharged body slam anyway? Crash could break lock crates in Crash 2 with a normal belly flop. So did Naughty Dog just pull a Madden and give us a mechanic that does the same thing and just gave it a different name? It's just a belly flop with a longer animation, and as a channel that respects the awesome power of a crossbody, we're disappointed with the uselessness of this one.
And that's it, Crash 3, for disrespecting Team Crossbody in the sacred art of one, which is just a sideways body slam. I'm taking your last chip. You're felt it, Crash 3. Get fucked.
But other than getting a difficulty boost and better level design that incorporates the superpowers more, the complaints we have with the platforming elements of the game are minor at best, as these levels are still a blast to play through, even though they're slightly easier than what Crash 2 brought to the table. It's all still well designed and solid enough to entertain. And that's it for the traditional platforming for Warped, which is a little strange to say, but here we are. Luckily, or perhaps unluckily, depending on who you ask, Crash Bandicoot 3 isn't a one-trick pony and offers several additional game modes to make up for the lack of normal Crash action, which, aside from another returning gimmick we're about to talk about, are the more conflicting aspects of the game and might be the driving reason why some people do prefer Crash 2 to 3.
Crash Bandicoot's famous auto-runner stages makes a return, but they're inherited by the newly playable and strangely quiet Coco and her friend Purah. Only 2 levels of Crash 3 feature this gimmick, Orient Express and Midnight Run, and both levels are based off the construction of the Great Wall of China, with a day and night variant respectively. They play similar to the polar stages of Crash 2, with the only meaningful change being that Purah can speed up indefinitely, instead of the little burst of speed from before. Being the third time around, we feel like these stages are perfect, with the right amount of obstacles, box placements, and little stretches of path that allow you to run. We never get bored at playing these stages, specifically looking for these levels on a fresh playthrough. Sadly, there's only 2 of them, and they both share the same theming, but they're excellent all the same.
Crash might have lost the auto-runner stages to his little sister, but gained a new gameplay style through these neat little underwater ones that make up for that. We heard all kinds of complaints about these levels when we were growing up, from them being dull, hard to control, or not fitting what a Crash Bandicoot game is. And we always felt that particular comment was strange because we kinda always viewed these stages as an extension of the platforming, just with better overall mobility and where to move around. The controls are almost identical to the base gameplay, with the exception of the obvious speed up kicking button. And I never thought it was hard to control, just a little different. I mean, he's underwater. How else is he going to control? We thought they nailed the physics for being underwater. I mean, we never experienced being in water that deep before, but we have flopped around in the middle of the ocean before, so we can assume it's close enough. Since you don't have complete control over Crash, it leads to a lot of unique challenges like dodging electrified rotating plates, speeding past ill hunting spots, or navigating around heat-seeking mines. Super cool set pieces that wouldn't be seen otherwise. Players can also get a hold of an overpowered underwater jet ski thing that fires torpedoes and helps get around the map much more quickly, but it's balanced by not being available all the time, giving Crash a much larger hitbox to contend with, and still being destroyed after one hit. These levels are a lot more methodical than your typical platforming stages, and rewards things such as patience in a unique way. We're not here to try to convince you that these are spectacular or anything. These underwater levels might be the weakest gameplay addition, but they get the job done, and much like the auto-running stages, there's only 2 of them, so they don't overstay their welcome.
Did you know? Crash 3 head-to-head cutscene where lip sync specifically to match the 6 languages used for the game. This was considered a novel concept for the time of release. Did you know? Cortex uses 3 different models over the course of the game, which result in his hair regularly changing color. During Tiny's boss battles, hair appears to be purple. During the talking segments between levels, it appears to be blue. And during his boss battle, it's black. Did you know? One of the promotional artworks of the game is based off the cover of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Moreover, warp orbs are based off the spares used by Terminator to travel through time in the movies.
Did you know Coco was made silent in this game for the same reasons Crash was before? Naughty Dog intended players to identify themselves with the playable character more easily without personality dislikes.
Did you know? The title menu is completely different in the Japanese version of the game. Crash pops up and dances, and his dance includes new moves not present in his dance in other versions.
Did you know when you defeat Cortex the first time, you'll unlock a secret warp room, the lift of which can be found in the center of the Time Twister. When you go into this room, you'll notice an assembly line with Cortex's henchmen in cyborg form being outfitted with fake skin and being sent to different time periods. This is another reference to the Terminators of that series. The graphics of Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped aren't that different overall from the previous game. I can assume everything just looks a lot more tighter, but that just could be me thinking this. The environment spread a lot more different effects this time around, with levels featuring things like steam and other visual flourishes like Crash running through shallow waters like in the prehistoric levels. Now counting bosses and things like secret entrances, Crash 3 has about 30 levels total, and Naughty Dog made sure to make these feel as distinct as possible as not to fall into the same trappings as second game did. Which they kinda did. It's about 75-25. You see, the time traveling gimmick really helps push the visuals beyond the standard lab or vague island settings we'd be getting up to this point, and might have continued to get if this game was still set on the Sanity Island. The issue with Crash 2's repeated level theming isn't corrected much here, but at the very least each of the game's repeated level themes are distinctly unique from one another, with repeating themes having more extreme differences between them than in the past. Each theme has its own identity, from the moody weather of the medieval stages, the unique ocean flora and relaxed mood of the underwater levels, the bright, vibrant, and at the time, next level reflections of the ocean surface with the jet ski stages, to the heavily barrel-bordered and sleek futuristic city levels. Something we never appreciated until now is the various amount of enemy types Crash 3 pumps out, which Crash 2 did as well, but they're a lot more stand out this time around. There is a new enemy type for nearly every level in the game, and what's even more impressive is that each of them has their own unique way of killing Crash and Coco, which subconsciously helps ease the blow of something cheap happening while platforming and costing you a life, weirdly enough. We also enjoy the various disguises the lab assistants took throughout the many timelines Crash and Coco encountered them, and which you will find out goes neatly into the lore of the game later on. Real quick, I just wanted to point out something I noticed with the visuals while going through the main 3 Crash Bandicoot games. While Crash 1 doesn't look better than the other 2, I ended up finding that game a lot more visually interesting with its more detailed backgrounds. Crash 1 was a lot more of a slower paced game, and players had to stop to calculate jumps far more often than the sequels, so there was a lot more attention added to those elements. It's the opposite case for the other 2 games, where they are essentially trading the sense of skill of the first game's backgrounds for better animations, character models, foreground elements, pretty much everything. And since those games are so much faster, players won't have to focus on or even notice the downgrade. I guess when dealing with something like the PlayStation, such trade-offs have to be made. But as a kid, I never did notice, so it worked, I guess. That's all, just something I found interesting.
The jetboard levels are finally given their time to shine with Coco's jet ski levels. Taking out what didn't work from the previous game and expanding on what did, these are probably the best out of the 3 new vehicle types. The controls are really well done here. The weight and speed of the jet ski feels just right, and while combining both of them while jumping off a ramp is extremely satisfying to do. The objectives of these stages are pretty much the same as everything else. Make it to the end of the stage while avoiding various ocean themed obstacles with their own unique way of being bypassed. There's a lot more here than what's available for Crash 2, which pretty much just came down to bobbing mines and whirlpools. Naughty Dog did a really good job with the water physics, with the constant rising and falling of the waves, really selling the fact that you're ripping through the middle of the ocean. Everything here is a lot more free flowing. These are really well done.
The motorcycle levels we don't have as much love for as the jet ski, but they're serviceable enough. The controls are solid if a little stiff, but we feel this was done intentionally as not to make the levels too easy. In order to win these races, players will have to have enough knowledge of the overall controls and physics to boost and maintain good racer lines for as long as possible without hitting things like cop cars or falling into pits. These levels are masterable, but I wouldn't scream at anyone that doesn't enjoy the feel of the motorcycle. It's very hit or miss. Besides, the Hot Rod Lab assistants don't drive too fast, so you'll be able to catch up with them just by racing well enough if you find using the boosters a little too cumbersome.
Did you know? This is Aku Aku's debut in a non-Japanese speaking role.
Did you know Dr. Nefarious Trophy was added to the game as the developers felt a time traveling boss was needed, as the game did focus on time travel? His shortened name is Entropy, and is a pun on entropy, a term used to measure randomness and disorder over time. Did you know Crash has 30,000 frames of animation, much more than any other video game character at the time? Did you know? A good deal of level names are references to various other media. Hang 'em High and Midnight Run are both named after movies. Dynamite is a reference to JJ's phrase from Good Times.
Hello! Aren't you glad you let your fingers do the walking? Cause you got kids Dynamite doing the talking.
Tomb Raider is a reference to Tomb Raider. Oedipus Rex is a reference to the Greek tragedy Oedipus Rex. Skeet Craze is named after a 1986 game made by Naughty Dog founders Jason Rubin and Andy Gavin, and Rings of Power is named after their first game ever made for the Sega Saturn, which is ironically the last stage in the game.
While the music of Crash 2 is amazing, we feel like the soundtrack for the third game slightly edges it out by a couple of inches. There isn't a whole lot to say, at least nothing we didn't say already in Crash 2, but the music here is a lot more varied. Well, it's largely thanks to the time traveling, duh, but Crash 3 has a lot of dope tracks. Here's a couple of our favorites. Crash 3 OST is a mix of both playful and badass. Maybe a lot of the music leans more into the playful side of things compared to a lot of the more badass tracks in 2, but I can't not hear this music and just think, it's peak Crash Bandicoot. The airplane stages are a lot like the jetpack stages from the previous game, only if the controls work the way they should have. You see, the plane moves itself, meaning you only have to change direction. The goal to V stages is destroy Cortex's blimps and planes, and make sure you kill the minions off screen because they will definitely miss your health bar if left alone. Well, at least they have the common courtesy to fly in front of you, but that's mostly because you lack a crosshair. These game modes are simple, but they're fun to play.
Time trials are the final gameplay mode in which players can choose to enter by first completing a stage, returning to it, and collecting a clock item to start the mode. Upon starting, every Wampa will leave the level, boxes will transform into time trial crates that can be broken to stop the timer to up to 3 seconds, and any Aku before getting the clock will be automatically destroyed, with 3 Aku crates being added throughout the stage that features them. Upon finishing within the recommended times, you will be rewarded with the game's new collectible, the Relic, which will be a staple of the series from here on in. Relics are split into 3 different tiers: Sapphire, Gold, and Platinum. Sapphire relics are the lowest tier and therefore the easiest to shoot for. Gold relics are the mid tier and are the minimum requirement for max completion of Crash 3, and Platinum relics is the highest reward from a time trial, which will require not only a deep understanding of the levels and how to optimize them, but also the use of the power-ups such as the Speed Shoes and Death Tornado Spin. Earning every gold or platinum relic will grant players a gem. Collecting the first 5 initial relics will unlock a secret warp room where bonus levels can be found, with obtaining multiples of 5 unlocking new levels there. As a method just to add more runtime to the game, the time trial mode is another solid addition to the formula. Crash 3 doesn't have a whole lot of long levels, so if you're going for golds or platinums, there won't be a whole lot of time dedicated to things like routing, unless you decide to get serious as a personal challenge. Some levels of the game clearly aren't designed with speed in mind, left the aforementioned underwater sections, but those aren't huge hurdles to cross to earn good times on after some practice and a couple of run attempts.
So, that's all the new gameplay modes they added for Warp, and I don't see what's the issue here. Granted, there isn't a lot of classic gameplay this time around, yeah, but almost all the ideas of this game were expanded concepts off of past games. Sure, I get that people don't enjoy these stages as much as the core Crash gameplay, and maybe Naughty Dog should have added a little more platform stages so the game favors that a bit more. These are fair opinions to have, but we don't think Crash 3 is a weaker game because of it. Some of these ideas might be better than others, but they're certainly fun to be had with all of them. And if you really hate some of the gimmicks, none of them last very long, and they only take up a small percentage of the game as a whole. Besides, this is the last classic Crash game developed by Naughty Dog, and they decided to get a little ambitious and toss out some of the ideas they always had for the series, and that make these little additions hard to hate in our opinion. The various forms of play was ultimately for the best, because it helped the game stand out from the other 2 games. And it's not like we're saying if an all-platforming Crash 3 would be considered bad or something, but I don't think it would have had the lasting impact if Naughty Dog were to go with that route.
Our perspective of the series has changed during the making of this retrospective, with us thinking Crash 2 was the uncontested best game, but since we finished the final traditional Crash game of the run, we should provide our overall opinions of these games now. Crash 1 was a fun, fairly challenging game with solid level design, with said levels having awesome environmental storytelling, but the save system was an overcomplicated nightmare, controls weren't all that great, and completing the game was more annoying than any kind of fun. Crash 2 is an awesome game, despite being a little undercooked, and our complaints can be considered nitpicks. The game doesn't really suffer for anything major. It expanded and improved on just about every issue Crash 1 had, and even though it's flawed, it tended to provide players with a more narratively driven story, and in terms of what people want from a Crash Bandicoot game, this is considered peak. And with Crash 2 being the peak of the series, it kinda left Crash 3 in an awkward slot. Once again, the game could have been the same thing like Crash 2, but they chose to correct one of the biggest complaints lobbied against the previous entry, and that was largely with its variety. Also, the story was a lot better. Because let's be real here, kids, Crash 2 is a little repetitive. Even if that repetitiveness wasn't an open complaint, Naughty Dog decided to see it and attempt to fix it anyway. And when it's all said and done, we thought it was a good choice. But it has to be remembered that these games were made a year or earlier apart from one another. So fixing the issues of a past game sometimes won't leave enough time to see certain issues of the current. But hey, Naughty Dog has done more making 3, CTR making 4 games a year apart from one another than most studios today can do with 1 game in 5 years. And that's a little sad when you say it, but here we are. So it's okay to like Cortex Strikes Back more than Warp, because to us they're essentially the same game. It just depends what you're looking for with that particular play session. You want to play a game with a bit more focus on platforming? Crash 2 is for you. You want a little more variety tossed in while you do some platforming? Well, Crash 3 has got you covered. One isn't better than the other because one is designed to cover for the weaknesses of the last, and that's what people tend to forget. These games weren't made in a bubble. Although we have a newly gained respect for the first game, we're going to keep it 100 and say that if you need something to absolutely be considered the worst game, well, that's the first one. And even some people think that's the best in the trilogy. So just do what we do and embrace them all. I think it's doing a disservice to the trilogy to try them all individually anyway. Well, I feel TCB's a little crashed out for now. Our original idea was just to do the first 3 games and hopefully sneak in a CTR video before the end of the summer. But much like Crash 1, we don't have much nostalgia for the original version of that game, with nitro-fueled filling that area. So we want to take our time making this video, and that may take a while, so we might not make that deadline. So fuck it, it'll come out when it comes out in this now living Crash retrospective, where we'll return to review 1 or 2 mainline Crash games periodically. But first, we want to take a quick break and cover something else before getting back into Crash. So we hope we see you there, and we'll see you next time on Nostalgia Turns.
So, last time we left the Crash Bandicoot series, we were telling y'all to stop talking crap about Crash Bandicoot 3, because that game was secretly a balance patch for Crash 2, which was another balance patch for Crash 1. I don't make the rules here. Naughty Dog made those games more or less a year apart from one another, and speaking of Naughty Dog, after making 3 successful games and Crash becoming somewhat of the de facto mascot for the PlayStation 1, they were pretty much done with games involving having an orange bastard jumping around. Luckily for them, while Crash 3 was under production, they were working on an unnamed racing game only known as Project X, which consisted of featureless blockheads. They showed the prototype to Sony Computer Entertainment, and the question of making it part of the Crash series came up. Now, neither Sony or Naughty Dog owned rights to the Crash IP, Universal did. I suppose as long as it wasn't another platformer, Naughty Dog was cool with turning this project into a Crash game. But they didn't want to deal with Universal Interactive anymore, and told Sony if they wanted the IP to be a Crash title, then they would have to search something out for them. Sony did just that and licensed the IP out for 2 more games. The racing project Naughty Dog was currently developing, and another with Eurocom Interactive. We all know what that Eurocom game came out to be, and I'm sure you can detect the light scent of shit wafting out of your screen too. But I'm gonna have to ask you guys to ignore it for the time being. We'll get to it soon enough. Universal gave Sony 9 months to finish what would be later dubbed as Crash Team Racing, and they went right to work. Naughty Dog split their team. The smaller group worked on CTR, and a larger group went to work on a prototype for a new IP for the upcoming PlayStation 2. We all know what that PS2 prototype came to be, and I'm sure you can detect the slight scent of flowers wafting out of your screen too, but I'm gonna have to ask you guys to ignore it for the time being. We'll definitely get to it soon. Crash Team Racing was released in October of 1999, and just like the other Crash games up until this point, received critical praise from gaming publications, sold extremely well, and was embraced by the fans, being considered the best out of the Mario Kart clones, often being credited with outperforming its contemporary at the time, Mario Kart 64. But that's more like punching a mentally challenged kitten, because if we're being completely honest with you guys, Mario Kart 64 is dog shit. This is Team Crossbody, this is the final game in the Naughty Dog era of Crash Bandicoot, and this is part 4 of our Nostalgia Tards retrospective.
Want a piece of me? You want some of this?
Crash is back, and this time he's behind the wheel. Crash Team Racing, 25 hairy tracks, over 12 playable characters, and all the turbo boost and TNT crates you can handle. Plug in the multi-tap and up to 4 players can go bumper to bumper. And remember, buckle up.
Is there a problem, Granny?
PlayStation. The story of CTR centers around this racing tournament that was taken advantage of by the game's main antagonist, Nitrous Oxide. an alien from the far-off planet of Gasmoxia who claims to be the fastest racer in the galaxy. He travels from planet to planet to find creatures to test his skill, and this fixation has brought him to Earth. He issues the inhabitants a challenge, to choose the fastest among them to serve as a representative to race against him. If they win, he will spare their miserable little rock, but if he wins, he will turn the entire planet into a parking lot and enslave all of humanity. This threat should really be bothering characters like Cortex and Engine, because I don't know where Crash and the other furries land on the whole humanity spectrum. Does the world know about Crash Bandicoot and all the nonsense that surrounds him? When he's around normal people, does he and the others have to wear trench coat disguises like a Ninja Turtle or a Street Shark? Are there any normal people in the Crash universe? Because I doubt there's other talking animals, since all these guys are mutants made by two mad scientists. Meaningless world building aside, CTR sticks to what makes the usual Crash Bandicoot story strong, and that's telling a simple but engaging story. Well, Crash 1 and Warp does at the very least. I still don't know why Crash 2 was never proofread. Out of all the 4 games we covered so far in this retrospective, Crash Team Racing might be the best story of them all. First off, nitrous oxide threatens the entire planet, which automatically means that someone like Cortex and his crew will be tied into the events, and that provides context as to why Fred and foes are carting around, as they all share a common goal: protect Earth. This fixes the go-to question that often plagues the Mario Kart games. Why would Bowser be having fun with Mario when they were trying to kill each other the last game? It's a stupid question, but you see it get brought up all the time, as if Mario Kart ever had a narrative behind it, it doesn't solely rely on its gameplay. With Naughty Dog wanting to give the game some kind of narrative structure, the plot had to justify this somehow, and Oxide's appearance does just that. Creates a foe that forces opposite sides together as Earthlings trying to combat a threat that they've never encountered. Sure, the Bandicoots dealt with mad scientists and an evil ancient mask before, but neither Cortex nor Uka Uka ever displayed or claimed to have the ability to be such an instant danger to the entire planet, which makes Oxide the biggest threat they face yet. So they race to decide who the fastest is, and I love how even though Oxide is only like in 3 scenes total, his presence remains and looms all over the story. This can especially be seen after defeating the bosses, where some of them will openly admit that even though you defeated them, they're nervous that you aren't fast enough to beat Oxide, and places the probable destruction of the entire planet on you being chosen as Earth's representative. I never really paid attention to the plot before, but in all honesty, this is a little tense. And yeah, all the bosses of CTR are bosses from the previous games, and therefore evil by default. But this doesn't come off as a bad guy being salty that they lost a race, and more that they're scared and after thinking they were the fastest, now have to put their faith into you, your chosen character, to get the job done. Evil or not, you have to remember that these guys are also Earthlings, and have lives outside of fighting the Bandicoots or working for Cortex. This issue came pretty fast, and you can feel the scramble to find anyone who can deal with Oxide and save the world. Of course, I'm talking about an E for everyone game here, so the plot can't be played up any more than it already is for the sake of the kiddies. But Crash games are always lighthearted, even when trying to communicate more darker themes, and CTR still embodies that mindset. If I had any issues with the story, it would be nitpicky things like why doesn't Cortex and the other scientists attack Oxide's ship directly, but things like that can just be left unexplained. It's not like it's a plot hole or anything, you can just infer that maybe Earth's weapons aren't strong enough to damage the ship or penetrate the shields or something. The only thing I would say that the plot could have done was have Oxide demonstrate his destructive abilities, kinda like how Eggman blew up half the moon in Sonic Adventure 2. It isn't needed, but it would help sell the danger of Oxide so much more. Then again, maybe he's full of shit, and this is just an empty threat. Well, that will still be okay since the threat alone already has our characters scared shitless, so Oxide is still getting what he wants. After defeating him twice, Oxide is actually an alien of his word and leaves Earth untouched. And this is where the bad guy being a salty bitch kicks in, as he uses the I must be getting old excuse, like he's DSP or something. Is DSP from Gasmoxia? This ending is kind of anticlimactic considering that it's the 100% one. I guess it's not as bad as Crash 1 where the plot just kind of stops. I suppose beating a solid villain like Oxide and watching him having to deal with that loss is satisfying enough.
The story mode is told through its adventure mode, which serves as a main distraction to the game. Before starting, players will have the choice of choosing 1 out of 8 starting roster members. But once you remember that characters are divided into 3 engine classes, beginner, intermediate, and advanced, then it's actually 3 characters to choose from. After that's done, you'll be dropped off at the starting area in Sanity Beach, where you'll be greeted by your side's respective masks, Aku Aku for the good guys, and Uka Uka for the bad.
Welcome to the Adventure Arena. You can travel around this area and practice your driving skills. The dots and stars on the map represent warp pads, which lead to races.
I know this was memed to death, but seriously, what's the deal with the lip syncing? This is Crash 1 level stuff here, and I don't understand why this is the case. Crash 2 wasn't perfect, but it was far from bad. And Crash 3, what I remember, was spot on. And that makes sense because the game's lip syncing was tied to each game's available different languages. The adventure mode was clearly inspired by Timber Island from Diddy Kong Racing. It doesn't really do anything with it like in DKR. And while not a lot in that game, there was a couple of things you can do that had you interacting within this hub world. Sure, newer players could use this space to get the hang of the mechanics, but all in all, it's just connected hubs to get from one event to another. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, but I don't know why they even bothered calling it an adventure mode when you're just driving around. And it definitely feels like a missed opportunity to put some hub world activities in there. Also, like in DKR, completing various events will gain different rewards. Trophies are obtained by finishing first in single races. Collecting 4 trophies in each hub world will unlock the boss for that area. Boss keys are gotten after defeating the boss of that area. The bosses of CTR aren't anything too difficult, just a one-on-one race with an asshole that fire items out constantly. It's pretty annoying to catch up to them, but once you overtake them, they'll lose all will to fight and won't really try to earn their place back. Beating all 4 bosses will give you access to Oxide, of course. Relics work the same way they did in Crash Warp. Race against the clock for the best time while utilizing time crates to freeze the clock. If the player managed to break all the crates in the track, a perfect bonus will be awarded that will knock 10 seconds off the final time. After collecting all 18 relics, Oxide can be challenged again for an alternate ending. CTR tokens can be obtained by completing the CTR challenges, which is this game's version of the silver coins from DKR except more brand friendly. During this challenge, the letters C, T, and R will be hidden within each track and must be collected while the race must be finishing first. The tokens come in 5 different colors, with green, red, blue, and yellow being rewards for finishing. The purple token will have to be won by finishing the crystal bonus round, by collecting 20 crystals within a certain time. Trophy races are unlocked by getting 4 tokens of the same color, and completing those will earn you a gem that will unlock the boss characters, and Fake Crash for some reason. And that's their adventure mode of Crash Team Racing. Overall, this is a really good game mode with the empty hard world aside. There's tons of things to do here and it will easily double the amount of time you spend in this mode. But now, with the adventure mode out of the way, there's a couple of things to do outside of it.
Did you know? Crash, Cortex, and Aku Aku are the only 3 characters to appear in every Crash Bandicoot game produced by Naughty Dog. Did you know? The character Ripperoo originally had spoken dialogue.
I'll show you why I'm thriving! Last one across the finish line is a rotten brain!
But it was later replaced with his more traditional manic laughter with subtitles. Did you know that Power and Polo were originally going to ride in the same cart and be counted as one character, but due to the memory limitations in the PlayStation's hardware, they were put into separate carts. Komodo Mo was supposed to appear alongside his brother Komodo Joe, but he was omitted, and Oxide never got to be a playable character. Did you know that Nitrous Oxide was originally a mad scientist who was obsessed with speed, who was plotting to speed up the Earth until the end of time?
There isn't a whole lot of negatives I can find with CTR. I suppose the graphics feel like a step down from the previous 3 games. The character models look pretty damn rough and the tracks don't look much better, with everything giving off a vibe that is made out of cardboard and painted over. I'm not saying the game is ugly to any extent, especially with the environments. Crash to me usually strikes a pretty good balance between looking cartoony while providing some believable environments. The more blocky look of the game makes CTR come across as more cartoon-like this time around. Specifically, the games that remind me of is those PS1 Looney Tunes games like Sheep Raider. Seemingly to make up for this, the game seems a lot more vibrant than normal. I don't know if it's just me, but the colors just seem to pop, and it might be because of the more simplistic and less detail-oriented graphics, although it definitely adds to that more cartoony feeling of the scenery for these tracks. Putting that aside though, Naughty Dog made sure that all these tracks felt very distinct and characterized. Each stage outside of the more character-themed ones are based on various locations visited in the platform games. So while the graphics isn't as impressive as the Trilogy, the areas you race around look and feels like Crash Bandicoot at the very least. CTR is the first game in the series without the use of the camera being placed in the highly specific predetermined spots, with the pre-calculated number of polygons that help them squeeze and work around a lot of limitations that the PlayStation had. So Naughty Dog had to spread things around this time, and that resulted in a goofier looking game. But it does keep a constant frame rate in both single and multiplayer modes, with the only slowdown happening during the trophy animations. The weaker graphics, in my opinion, gives the game a more unique look, and it helps it stand out from a presentation standpoint when being compared to the other games in the series. It works in its favor.
Arcade mode lets you join in on a single race or play an entire cup with the CPU. Battle mode is a multiplayer exclusive that allows up to 4 players with the use of the PS1's multi-tap. You guys remember the multi-tap, right? The peripheral that if you were young and pissed off enough always doubled as a boomerang? And don't get me started on the PS2's version of that. That's like training a boomerang for a tiny flail. Anyway, I know a lot of people love these kind of modes in their kart racers, but I've never been a fan. Locking players in a small arena to just shoot at each other was never really appealing. I like DKR's take on battle mode as the power-up system was more interesting than most, and there was also more variety offered other than shooting each other. So this was our first time playing a mode like this outside of Diddy Kong. And for what it is, it's fun. You can tell this mode was designed for 4 players because it's a little dull with just 2. But there were some tense moments of outmaneuvering one another and some oddities that took place. It's fun, but it gets old kind of fast. I don't understand why this mode couldn't be played in single player. Seems like a waste not having it available for people who are just playing by themselves and might want to burn a couple of minutes. Time trials, or what I like to call them, the final Bush's bread and butter. I love me some time trials. This is a single player mode that puts you up against the clock. No CPU, no items, no time crates, just you and your knowledge of the track and understanding of the core mechanics and racing fundamentals. Managing good times will have you be challenged by Entropy's ghost, and beating his times on every stage will unlock him as a playable character. After beating any of Tropy's times, will unlock Oxide times for a greater challenge, but clearing these will not unlock anything. The only way Oxide can be played is through a cheat device like GameShark. Oxide couldn't make the roster because his big ass was causing memory issues.
In the early stages of the game's development, the team designed a replica of Diddy Kong Racing's Crescent Island to test how big the racetracks could be. And that's one thing I'm glad didn't transfer over from DKR to CTR, the track design. Don't get me wrong, Diddy Kong Racing is a fantastic game, but a lot of the tracks there are really short and simple, not to mention they lack a lot of personality. CTR tracks on the other hand are the complete opposite, and there are some of the better ones made for the genre. The various hazards, extra paths, shortcuts, bottomless pits with tons of twists and turns that both really show off and make good use of the excellent drifting controls make some of the more dynamic and fun tracks I've ever played. Each track feels truly unique from one another. We can even use 2 very similar looking stages for an example. Turbo Track has, turbo trips all over, while Side Coliseum features no turboing at all and challenges the player with their knowledge of the drifting mechanics. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that every track in this game is a banger or something, but I just can't stress enough that most of these stages are just fantastic to play through and very memorable. Did you know? The reason for Oxide's existence, according to Jason Rubin during the E3 panel, since the team at Naughty Dog knew this was going to be the last Crash game, they wanted to kill the franchise by jumping the shark. And they thought nobody would be able to take the game seriously if they added an alien. He had to be joking, right? His logic makes no sense here. Did you know? The female Bandicoots who hand out prizes, Amy, Isabella, Liz, and Megumi, are named after real-life people who are involved in the Crash Bandicoot games. Additionally, the Trophy Girls along with the Forgotten Twana Bandicoot were added proper as playable characters in a remake remaster Crash Team Racing nitro-fueled. Did you know? A playable demo of Spiral 2 Ripto Rage is available in the game. You can unlock this by holding down the L1 and R1 buttons while pressing down, circle, triangle, and right. This is also available in the Japanese version too, though the code is a bit different. Did you know? According to an article published by Electronic Game Magazines a month before the game release, and a Q&A interview with Jason Rubin, the player would receive gold wrenches by beating a level or a boss in order to upgrade the car's performance. The reason why they were removed is unknown.
Shocker! A Crash Bandicoot game has fantastic music. While we feel Crash 3 Warp had the strongest music of the platforming trilogy, Crash Team Racing stands as our favorite in the entire Naughty Dog era. Essentially, each song is a Crash 2 and 3 track, but injected with more energy to match the feeling of a racing game. Here's a couple of our favorites. Now, CTR has a ton of great things going for it, but the most important aspect of the game has to be the controls. This has to be some of the best feeling controls I have ever felt in a kart racing game, which is absolutely shocking to me as someone who almost exclusively played the nitro-fueled version of the game and thought that controlled really well. The original actually plays better. Sure, if you know nothing about the game and are just looking at it from the surface, it's not hard to say that it's just a Mario Kart clone. But just like how fighting games can be pretty similar at face value, it's how these familiar elements are used that give CTR its identity. Fantastic controls aside. The subject of how the game controls, it's a little hard to explain. The handling of the carts have this very satisfying heft while controlling them. The way the physics work when traveling along the road feels very tactile, especially in tracks like Tiger Temple or Tiny Arena, that both have a bunch of small hills and jumps in them. You can for sure feel the weight of the cart while going uphill, and with the way the gravity affects them as they go off ramps and slam back into the ground. You'll take a jump the wrong way and you'll have to take a little more time to go up the hill, which makes players aiming to make good times or simply trying to overtake another racer consider where to place a jump and how to land to prevent speed reduction. The turning feels both loose and controlled at the same time. Once again, the weight of the cart feels centered enough to always feel like you're in control of it at all times, while just being loose enough not to fight against you. Jumping in most other kart racing games is usually a very static event. You line up your jump and gravity will carry you the rest of the way with little to no control in the matter. Jumping in CTR gives you full control in the air, and that just helps make the game feel so much more fun to play because no matter what you're doing, you're always in control. Add on the ability to earn boosts based on the height of your jump, and you're encouraged to find anything to use as a ramp. The controls of CTR are amazing and has never been topped, and what's really impressive is that the feeling never goes away, no matter what engine class is chosen. Super Mario Kart is often misconstrued as the first ever kart racing game. I certainly think it's clearly the one that popularized the genre, but I think the honor of being called the first belongs to Sega's Power Drift. Super Mario Kart, however, to my knowledge, is the first to use power sliding and items as core mechanics that soon became staples of the genre. And when it comes to the subject of power sliding, in my opinion, CTR has one of the best takes on this concept. Of course, CTR's take is also very different from Mario Kart, where instead of drifting until you get a color spark to tell you to let go to move fast, you rather use one trigger to initiate the drift, and the opposite trigger to take advantage of boosts when the drift bar is green. You can do this up to 3 times, and it makes drifting so rewarding in CTR. It's a little awkward getting started, but I find it very engaging, and the tracks take advantage of the smooth drifting by having all kinds of twists and turns to keep players using it. Crash Team Racing also has a good set of items to play around with too. The items themselves are particularly special, with character respective masks, bowling bombs, homing rockets, beakers, and warp orbs being the stand-in for the Starman power-up, green shell, red shell, bananas, and blue shells respectively. But unlike Mario Kart, every item isn't overtuned and fall more on the balance side. The game also has coins that can be collected to speed up carts in the form of Wumpa Fruit, but it also has a distinction of powering up the current item after collecting a maximum of 10, which feels like a strange middleman between Diddy Kong Racing's item management and Mario Kart. I don't think it's as interesting as those two games, but it gets the job done. I'm just glad the items don't really get in the way of what the game should be at the end of the day, and that's a racing game. Where Mario Kart feels like a party game that happens to be about racing, CTR is a racing game through and through, and the mechanics and items lend to that idea. Don't get me wrong, there's still the occasional item gangbang, but this happens very far and few. This is a very skill-based game, and items won't bail you out if you aren't any good at it. They can help, but the experienced player will catch up regardless of the item thrown at them. There's a ton more stuff to go into if we were planning to go deeper into the systems of CTR, like the hidden reserve stat, speed ghosting, air braking, and U-turning that adds a lot more of the skill expression element to the game, but we'll end it here just to keep things simple. Needless to say that CTR is one of the greatest kart racing games ever to be released, and in my opinion is yet to be surpassed. Sonic All-Stars Racing Transformed comes really close, but the questionable physics hold it back from true greatness. This entire game is the most balanced package when it comes to the genre. Great single player content, amazing controls, fantastic track design, simple but deep racing mechanics, and balanced items that doesn't get in the way of the racing in the racing game. All the more impressive that this was their first crack at making something like this. Crash Team Racing was the final game in a series made by Naughty Dog, and considering how many games released after their time, it's actually strange thinking about just how small of a time the creators of the IP spent with it in totality. In just 4 years, these devs managed to consistently create some of the highest praised games for early 3D gaming, and while I won't say they carried the PlayStation solely, Crash was obviously a huge part as to why it was successful. Naughty Dog after Crash will go on to become a first-party studio for Sony not soon after, and create an arguably equally successful series known as Jak and Daxter, which also consists of 3 platform games and a racing spin-off title that carried throughout the lifespan of the PlayStation 2, much like they did for the Crash series for the PlayStation 1. And well, we'll get to those games somewhere down the line. But what would happen to the Crash series after leaving the careful eyes and talented hands of Naughty Dog? Well, it isn't a stretch to say that their stint with the series were its halcyon days. Remember the beginning of the video? Sony struck a 2-game agreement with Universal Interactive Studios. One was to get what would become Crash Team Racing greenlit, and the other was to have Eurocom spearhead another game starring the Bandicoot. We all know what that game is. Man, I hope nostalgia works both ways, and this game is shockingly underappreciated because there's no running from it now. It's next. We'll see you next time on Nostalgia Tarts. Jesus, back. You guys smell that?